All right, Alexander, let's talk about what is going on between Iran and Israel and what is going on with the Trump administration. Will the Trump administration strike at Iran, and what kind of a strike are we looking at? Is it going to be a massive full-on airstrike, an attack on Iran? Are we going to see some sort of a limited strike on one of the nuclear facilities? Axios is reporting that the Trump administration is very close to green-lighting an attack on the Fordo nuclear enrichment facility, and they're going to use the bunker busters. And if that doesn't work, according to Axios, then Israel has a plan B, which is to send commando units into Fordo to put explosives in this cave facility, very far underground cave facility, and blow it up with commando units. And that's where we are. What are your thoughts on what Trump is thinking of doing?
Right. Well, I think there's a number of things I would like to say. First of all, I was expecting or assuming over the last 2 days that the decision to attack Iran had already been made. We've now had certain comments from Trump and other officials which suggest that perhaps there's some doubts starting to creep in. And we have reports that the Europeans are meeting with the Iranian Foreign Minister Arakchi in Geneva. So it could be that some people are rethinking this and that they're taking a step back. And there might be good reasons why they would do so. But I would just like to address this specific issue of the attack on Fordo. Now, does it make any sense, if you really are going to attack on Fordo, to publicize the fact in the newspapers in the way that it's being done? I mean, you're talking about bunker busting bombs and sending B-2 bombers to attack Fordo. I can just about get that. I mean, I can just about get how, if you're really sure that these bombers are going to get through, that you might be prepared to discuss it in the newspapers. And we've seen that the Iranians have been extremely disorganized and have clearly not prepared effectively for the kind of attacks that we've been seeing play out over the last week, and that they were caught flat-footed, and we'll come to that shortly. So it could just be that a bomber attack is really indeed on the cards. But a commando raid? I mean, are commando raids supposed to be secret? I mean, isn't that, you're going to conduct a special forces operation on a heavily defended facility in a mountainous region of central Iran, and you're going to write all about it in the newspapers? Now, it may be that people are so convinced that Iran is in complete state of disorganization and collapse that you can write about and discuss all of these things openly in the media, and there will be no consequences because Iran can't respond. But I do wonder whether there isn't some degree of misdirection here. And I wonder whether the real objective is not to get the Iranians focusing on Fordo and putting up their air defenses there, which I'm sure they will do, by the way. I mean, I think that Fordo is a facility that they're going to have to protect, but that the main heavy strike is going to come elsewhere. And I repeat what I've always been saying and what we've all been saying on this program, that the objective is not so much to stop Iran developing nuclear weapons, because it's got no program. We've been told this by multiple authoritative sources, the IAEA and the US intelligence community, that they got no plan at the moment to develop nuclear weapons, but rather to strike the political and military leadership of Iran, at people like Khamenei. We've been told already that the Americans have been thinking of killing Khamenei, or rather the Israelis have, and all of that. And I have to say, if there's an American strike, maybe that is the real objective. Or it could be that the Americans are planning to do both things at the same time. But and as I said, if I didn't have any further information, and of course, intelligence officers have lots of information, which is not accessible to us, I would be wondering whether all of these news reports and media speculations about commando raids on Fordo make any real sense. Because, as I said, if you really are planning an operation of this kind, surely you would want to keep it secret. Just saying.
Yeah, I was thinking they're probably going to do both at the same time, but the real objective is to get the leadership. I mean, they've been saying for a while now, you got to cut off the head of the snake, right? They keep on saying that. And Trump, in his post on Truth Social, where he said that he knows where the supreme leader is, he says, "We know where you are," and I believe he did say, "We haven't killed you yet."
Yeah, exactly.
I think he used that. Yeah, he used the word "yet."
He did.
Which to me signals that they're going to probably go after Khamenei. I think that's the play. If I had to take a guess, but who knows? Maybe the other thing I was thinking is maybe this is Trump's way of. I believe he used something similar with Syria back in his first term. It's his way of perhaps signaling to Iran that they're going to drop some bunker buster bombs on Fordo and. Then Trump can exit Iran by saying we destroyed their nuclear capabilities, or we set back their nuclear capabilities a couple of years, and now we're ready to talk. I mean, there could be that possibility as well if the Trump administration is genuinely looking to get out of this mess that it put itself in. Perhaps that could be an exit out of this. We drop a couple bombs. We say we destroyed the nuclear facilities, and Trump would say these are bunker buster bombs. No one else has them. These are the most powerful weapons in the world. You know how Trump is. He'll say something like that. And now that we've delayed Iran's nuclear weapons enrichment for 2-3 years, now we can return back. We can return to the negotiating table. That might be the plan. But more than likely, I agree with you. This is misdirection, and all the signs point to going after Khamenei because they believe that's what's going to collapse the regime. They believe if they get him, that collapses the regime.
Yes. I think that there is an overestimation, by the way, of what the supreme leader actually means in Iran. I think there's this idea that he's somehow the dictator type figure, and the whole structure revolves around him. I don't myself believe that is true. I think that while Khamenei clearly is a key decision maker, I think that pretty much as soon as he's gone, somebody will take his place. So I think if that is the plan, then I think there may be a misunderstanding there. But that takes us back to this potential attack on Fordo, because there's something else I want to say here, which is that people perhaps don't know this, but as part of the original JCPOA agreement of 2015, Iran had to hand over its enriched uranium above 3.6% to the Russians, which it did. And it had to destroy nearly all its centrifuges, which it did. In other words, it had to dismantle pretty much its entire nuclear enrichment program above a certain level. But then Trump pulled out of the JCPOA in 2018. And despite the fact that we had the pandemic between then and now, the Iranians were able to reconstitute the entire nuclear enrichment program, to rebuild all the centrifuges, to develop these highly protected sites at Fordo, and do all of these things in an extremely short space of time. And there's no reason to think if an attack on Fordo takes place and the facility is indeed damaged or even destroyed, that they wouldn't be able to do that all over again. Provided, of course, always provided that the political will to do it is there. So attacking Fordo might buy you a little time, but it might actually not be quite as effective as, again, some people assume. And of course, if these bombs really do destroy Fordo, then quite plausibly, the Iranians will then, next time round, build even more hardened facilities deeper in the ground with more centrifuges, less vulnerable to the kind of attack that we're seeing today. So this is a little bit like cutting off the head of the snake, only for two to grow back in its place, both in terms of decapitation strikes. Khamenei can be replaced. He's not as indispensable to the system as I think some people think. This is not a Saddam Hussein type regime in which there's one individual who basically controls everything. This is a much more diverse and, if I could put it like this, decentralized political system. So I think that, killing Khamenei might not be the solution to the political problem. Destroying Fordo, assuming it can be done, might not resolve the nuclear issue either. It could set the Iranians back. It could confuse them. But as I said, provided, and this is, of course, the key to this, the political will in Iran continues to be there, and I'm going to call it the regime, the system survives the blow, then, as I said, you might simply be creating further problems, more problems further down the line. It all hinges, again, as we've been discussing, in program after program, on the stability of the system within Iran.
Yeah, that's why we did the video with the title "Regime Change and Regime Survival." It's all about the survival of the government, of this system. Yes. That you're talking about. But the misdirection, the issue that I see with everything around Iran and Trump is that there is the misdirection of this is about nuclear weapons. And Trump uses misdirection effectively. Yes. It's a slogan for him. Yes. Iran must not have nuclear weapons. That's yes. the slogan that he's using. That's the slogan that's being repeated by everybody in the White House, by everybody in Congress, by the mainstream media. Yeah. Iran must not get nuclear weapons, but that's misdirection. Yeah. And everyone knows it. Yeah. So the whole Fordo thing is, to me, we're talking about an issue which is not really the issue when it comes to Iran. If this was, and maybe it is, I could be wrong. Maybe Trump really is sincere in his belief about nuclear weapons and his desire to remove nuclear weapons from Iran. And maybe he does try to take out the Fordo facility, and he returns to the negotiating table because he says it was a limited military operation. We did what I thought was correct with the nuclear enrichment. Now let's talk again. Maybe, but I give it a very low a chance that that's what's going to happen. More than likely, we are looking at decapitation strikes and regime change, because at the end of the day, that is what this is all about. All of it is about regime change.
I agree.
So I mean that's this is the lie that has been told, that is being told, even when it comes to strikes on Fordo. It's not about Fordo. It's not about nuclear weapons. It's about removing the regime. I just want to get your thoughts on this. I agree with what you're saying about Iran. It's a different situation if you go after the supreme leader. But if you try to put yourself in their shoes, they may be seeing things from the standpoint of Iraq. We got rid of Saddam Hussein. Yeah, the country's a mess, but what do we care? What do we care? We got rid of him. It's in chaos, and that serves us fine. Libya. The country's a mess. It's in chaos. But what do they care? It serves them fine. You can say the same thing about Syria. Absolutely. The same thing. Assad's gone. Now the country's in chaos, but maybe it serves their needs fine as well. And maybe you can make the same argument about Nasrallah, Hezbollah, Hamas. I mean, for them, they don't. Do they want a new regime that is structured and liked by the population, or is voted on in new elections or stuff. I mean, that's not what they really want, is it?
No, I don't know. Absolutely not. I mean, I completely agree with all of that. I mean, at the end of the day, if the entire objective, and I think this is a essential thing to say, people have been coming out with all sorts of videos showing how Netanyahu has been talking since 1992 about Iran's nuclear program, and that Iran is, on the brink of acquiring nuclear weapons and therefore must be attacked. And you're absolutely correct. I mean, it's not ultimately about nuclear weapons and Iran acquiring them. I mean, this endless repetition of the same issue is not really about preventing Iran acquiring nuclear weapons. It is about destroying a political system in Iran, which is seen by the neocons in the United States and by the leadership in Israel as a particular problem in the route of their objectives in the Middle East and in the wider world. So, the fact that Netanyahu talks about nuclear weapons and he's stuck in the same groove, and it's, he's repeating the same point again and again and again. Pointing this out to Netanyahu isn't going to worry him. It's not going to embarrass any of his supporters, because their objective isn't to prevent Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon. It is to prepare the ground for the overthrow, the destruction of the regime. And if the regime collapses, and if there's chaos in Iran, and if the country fragments into various constituent parts, again, as you absolutely rightly say, they live with chaos. They thrive on chaos. They've achieved chaos in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, as far as they're concerned. Provided these are not structured, strong countries, then they can live with that, at least in the short term. It may cause all sorts of problems for others, but it ultimately doesn't matter. By the way, what you've just said, I can remember years ago when George W. Bush was still president, an interview with John Bolton. And he made that particular specific point. He said it quite straightforwardly. People were asking him. There was an interview, and they asked him, "Well, look at Iraq now, the chaos that it's in. Do you really feel that this was a success, the war in Iraq?" And John Bolton says, what goes on in Iraq today is not of any importance to the United States. Overthrowing Saddam Hussein was. So the fact that we have overthrown Saddam Hussein is mission accomplished. The subsequent chaos is not our problem. Now, I don't actually agree with that. I think chaos is always a problem. But that we're talking about the thinking of the neocons. My point is simply this, that the system in Iran is actually profoundly different from the system that existed in Iraq, Syria, and Libya, which were indeed constructed around either one individual, Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi, or a particular family, the Assad family, and the Ba'ath party that was constructed around it. In Iran, it's different. I don't think the supreme leader, Khamenei, has anything like the same kind of role. And I think there are all kinds of institutions and agencies, very diversified and complex agencies, which function almost semi-autonomously, but somehow in a strange kind of way that's not easy for outsiders always to understand, overlap and support each other to keep the whole structure together. And of course, in Iran, there is a kind of politics as well. There's if you go to the media in Iran, it's unbelievably disputatious. There is a kind of public debate in Iran, which you certainly would not have found in any of the other countries. So they may be applying a model to Iran, which doesn't actually apply to Iran. Killing the supreme leader and some of his officials might not actually result in the collapse of the regime. It might simply mean that the regime reconfigures and that new people appear and that somebody else takes their place. So this is the. I mean, by the way, I don't know that that is the case, but that, it seems to me, is a possibility. That I do wonder whether the neocons in Washington or their friends in Israel have really worked out and thought about carefully. This is a complex regime. I don't pretend to understand it very well. I don't pretend to understand or know, the inner currents of Iranian society. But my sense is that, as I said, the regime, the system, does continue to have a very high level of support within the country and has legitimacy within the country. And if the supreme leader himself is killed and a replacement is found from within the existing structures, I suspect that the system will reproduce itself and it will continue to function. And that may not be what, as I said, the proponents of this policy quite expect or understand.
Well, I think answering your question about the neocons, if they think these things through, if you go off of the Tucker Carlson interview with Ted Cruz, it's obvious that they think none of this stuff through, nor do they even care about the countries that they're going to destroy. No. But the regime change is to me it's ultimate. The ultimate goal of regime change is not about putting in place a U.S. friendly government. No. It's not about putting in place a democratic government. No. It's not about putting in place a stable government. That's not the goal of the neocon regime change operations. I believe it's all about fragmenting the countries. Yeah. And I go back to say Yugoslavia, where the goal was the Balkanization and fragmenting Yugoslavia into very small microstates, and that's what we got. Yeah. You look at what they want to do to Russia, which is to regime change Russia, but that's it's regime change Russia not so you can keep Russia together. It's regime change Russia so you can break it apart. They have the same ideas for China. Yeah. They did it to Libya. They broke apart Libya. They did it to Syria. Syria now is in 3 different pieces. The goal is always fragmentation. Now, sometimes the fragmentation results in microstates that end up joining the European Union, for example, in the case of Yugoslavia. Okay, fine. But most of the times you have fragmented regions which end up being even more chaotic, and even more violent. But, if you're the neocons sitting in D.C., you're probably saying, it doesn't matter what kind of microstate we get, as long as it's not this big, powerful country. And the microstate, whether chaotic or stable, is so much easier to manage. It's easier to put NGOs there. It's easier to bribe people. It's easier to put them into the EU or to put them into NATO or to control their parliament. When you break it up into small pieces, it's just a lot easier to manage than to have a bigger regional competitor or maybe even a global competitor sitting there. I mean, this is how I think the ultimate goal is always about balkanization and fragmentation. Yes. I think that is the ultimate goal of all regime change operations, whether it's a smooth fragmentation or whether it's a chaotic fragmentation.
Yes. I mean, to repeat again, I am not sure that fragmentation is going to happen in Iran. I think there's a fundamental difference.
There is just to put a pause. I did read a Jerusalem Post article which actually did say that what should happen, given the demographics of Iran, and actually Tucker mentioned this. I mean, with Tucker and Ted Cruz, they were talking about the demographics, right? I did read an article which did say that given the demographics, what the Trump administration should strive for is to carve up Iran. That was an article.
Yeah, absolutely. I've read the article as well, and I'm sure you're absolutely right. And fragmentation and partitioning of a country is indeed what they want. I'm going to just make a few points. Firstly, I'm not sure that they can achieve the first objective, which is indeed to destroy the regime. And remember, if they don't destroy the regime, this whole operation has become a failure. And there are reports today, whether you can trust them or not, I don't know. But there are reports today that Trump himself is becoming increasingly nervous about involving the United States in what could turn out to be a protracted war, especially given the marked hostility to this of his political base, electoral base back home. So it may be that this operation doesn't succeed, even in destroying the current regime. Now, as for Iran, Iran is very different in some respects from Iraq, Libya, Syria, and those places, in the sense that, yes, it is a very diverse country. Many ethnicities live there, but it is a country with a millennial history. And what tends to happen is that despite all of the various, different demographics that exist within Iran, over time, it tends to coalesce and regroup and come together again. That has been the consistent pattern. So even if the political system collapses, it doesn't actually follow that there will be the kind of fragmentation that they imagine, because Iraq, Syria, Libya have only existed as states since basically the 1920s. Iran has a history going back, 700 BC or thereabouts. So, we are talking about a profoundly different society. And that's exactly comes back to what you said about Ted Cruz. People like him have very little idea or understanding of the previous history and of the past history of these nations. So, I mean, those are 2 points I wanted to make. But, and I will also quickly make a third point, which is I'm not convinced that chaos actually does work to the advantage of the United States. I mean, they created chaos in Iraq, and what happened was they ended up with a government there that was more friendly to Iran. They created chaos in Libya, and the country that looks like it's going to become the dominant power in Libya is actually Russia. It's Russia that's now starting to make the big deals and establishing the bases and things of that kind. And in Syria also, chaotic and terrible that the situation in Syria is, the effect of the collapse of Syria is that it's made Turkey and Erdogan stronger. So I'm not convinced that chaos in the kind and fragmentation in the way that they imagine does ultimately work to the advantage of the United States, whatever the neocons and their fellow travelers and their friends in Israel, for example, think. But the key thing again is this: will this operation succeed in destroying the regime in Iran? If it simply is able to go on reproducing itself, then you're in a long war. And of course, that war may not play out to your advantage. And that is something that any US president who is really concerned about US national interests ought to be worrying about, because the United States is massively overextended. It's got problems in the bond markets now. They seem to be increasing. There's financial issues. The military itself is overextended. I understand that there are only a certain number of aircraft carriers that are now operational. So they are gambling and trying to conduct these operations on an epic scale. And one wonders whether in Iran they might be risking going for something rather more difficult than they expect. Just saying.
Yeah, just a final question. Isn't it always the case that when you have a coup d'etat or a regime change, that it naturally progresses towards some sort of fragmentation?
Well, yes.
Yeah.
Up to
I mean,
now.
I say that even in the case of Cyprus, even in the case of Ukraine. I mean, whenever you have a coup d'etat, even in the Maidan 2014. I mean, eventually, the forces it push whatever was the country towards some sort of a split.
Yeah.
So I mean, even if you regime change, that's the key. If you regime change Iran, whatever happens is naturally, can't you make the argument that it will gravitate towards some sort of a split?
Well, absolutely. Now, you haven't mentioned perhaps the most important case study of all, which is the Soviet Union. Now,
Soviet Union,
what
yeah.
happened in 1991 had many of the qualities of a coup about it. And again, we've never really known whether the US was involved or to what extent it was involved. Most people in Russia believe it was heavily involved. But here is a case in point. Yes, the collapse of the Soviet Union did result in the disintegration of the Union and a massive fragmentation of the Union. But ultimately, and here it may not be that different with Iran, out of that chaos, a new state appeared, which was Russia. And that state stabilized, became much, much more coherent and much clearer, had a much clearer vision of the dangers that it faced and of its adversaries. And of course, it is now reasserting itself and reasserting itself very effectively in that particular space. Now, I don't want to look too far ahead. I don't think we're going to see anything like that happen in Libya, Iraq, or Syria, because to repeat again, these are ultimately rather artificial countries and societies. But I can certainly see it happen in Iran.
Right. Yeah. Good point. All right. We will end the video there. The Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and X. Go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch like what we are wearing in this video update. The link is in the description box down below. Take care.